Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Halifax Water Board of Commissioners meeting public portion. We'll get started right away with item 1A. Can I have a motion for exception for ratification of in-camera motions, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Deagle-Gammon. You have a seconder?
Commissioner Rawlings can second.
One or the other, but we're good. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Awesome, thank you. I don't believe we have to make any changes to the agenda, but Kathy, do you have anything that you want to add? You're in agreement the agenda is fine as it is?
I'm in agreement with the agenda, and I would like to suggest that because some of our board members are not able to have their cameras on, we should perhaps note or acknowledge which board members are present for the purpose of the public that are watching the meeting.
Fair enough. Would each of the board members like to just do a brief announce your name so people know? So I'm Craig McMullen, I'm the chair of the board.
And Becky Kent, Vice Chair.
Commissioner Colleen Rawlings.
Commissioner Kathy Deagle-Gammon, Councillor for District 1, Waverly, Fall River, Musquodoboit Valley.
Commissioner Ted Farquhar, member at large.
Commissioner Pam Lovelace, I think I just got my camera working.
You did. Awesome. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So let's move on. To item 2, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on Thursday, March 25th, 2021. The materials were distributed in advance. I'm assuming you had a chance to review. Could I have a motion for acceptance of the minutes, please?
My apologies, Mr. Chair. I'm going to interrupt here for a moment. We didn't have a motion on the approval of the order of business.
Thank you very much, Lorna. I appreciate that. So, Heidi, it's your job. That's usually you. Nice to know you have backup. Can I have a motion for approval of the order of business, please?
Commissioner Rawlings can do that.
I'll take Commissioner Rawlings' motion and Commissioner Lovelace's second, if that's okay. All in favor?
Aye.
I had a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I think on the members of the committees, Commissioner Kent wasn't in the environmental health and safety, but I didn't know if it was not part of the motion.
Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Rawlings. We'll be sending an email to address that. So,
okay.
Very sharp eye. Thank you.
Excellent. So I'll call for the vote again. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Abstentions? Thank you. So back to the approval of minutes. Can I have a motion for acceptance of the minutes of the March 25th meeting, please?
I so moved. Commissioner Lovelace.
Second, Commissioner Kent.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Errors or omissions noted? I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Abstentions? Motion carried. I didn't see anything in terms of business arising from the minutes. It looked like it was complete to me, unless anybody has anything they would like to bring up. Kathy, you're good?
You're correct.
Okay. So we'll move on to, oh, the accountant in me is getting shivers. Louis Montbrun. Financial statements for the year ended March 31st, 2021.
Yes, thank you. Louis de Montbrun, I'm the Director of Corporate Services and the CFO. The financial statements were taken to our audit committee on June 3rd, so we've gone through them in a fair amount of detail with the committee and addressed any of their questions or concerns at the time. So I'll try and stick to the highlights and move this through as exciting as I can. So the first sort of the key point for us is the auditors, Grant Thornton, have indicated that subject to them completing their last couple of items and approval by the board, that they are prepared to issue a clean audit opinion on the financial statements. I do always want to reference that we do financial statements under IFRS accounting rules for consolidation with HRM. And we also do financial statements under the Utility and Review Board accounting and reporting handbook. So we have the two methods of accounting that we do. So I'll address those as I go through the presentation. The financial statements and the notes are done based on IFRS. The schedules A through E are done in accordance with the UARB. I also wanted to reference that at the audit committee, we agreed to make a change, or they requested a change made to Schedule E and how we disclosed the reserves that came over from HRM. That adjustment's been made, so the Schedule E has been updated from what the audit committee would have seen. On the next slide, so I'll just a quick summary of the assets. So the two main areas, the current assets went up by about 2.4%, lower slightly related to lower earnings this year versus last year. The debenture, our fall debenture, which we expected to receive from Municipal Finance Corporation in the sort of October timeframe, was delayed. We actually received that in May, so that affected our current asset balances. And also we had a delay in the timing of our stormwater bills as a result of the impervious area changes that we made. On the non-current assets, an increase of about 1%, mostly related to new assets and the depreciation on those assets. So this is a quick snapshot of where the capital work in progress ended up for the year. 31 million in the current year. Last year it was about $18 million. And those are the details of the key or the larger of the projects. On the next slide, we have the utility plant and service, sort of the largest number on our financial statements. So these are the key assets that were capitalized in the current year, and total of 51.2. Last year we capitalized about almost $100 million. On the liability side, current assets decreased by about 13 million. Most of that related to capital spend and the impact that has on our trade payables and our accruals. We also had the delay in the debenture, which affected the current portion of debt on our current liability, sorry. And also we had lower debt than we would have expected as a result of the delay, but our long-term liabilities did go up by 1.8%. So this part is we're going to talk about the income statement, our summary of comprehensive earnings under the IFRS reporting requirements. Jake, if you can go to the next slide. So the key issue on the revenue side, we've talked about this several times. Our consumption decreased by about 1.85% related to COVID-19. The decreases were mostly in the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector. Our residential and multi-residential customers, that our consumption for those customers went up. Let me go to the next slide, Jake. On the expenditure side, overall expenditures increased by about 2.9 million. Two main drivers related to salary and benefit increases as a result of our union contracts, people moving within their bands within the contracts, non-union increases, and there were a net 3 new positions in the organization. And the other significant issue is an increase of about $2.2 million related to depreciation. On the financial and other revenue piece, our interest that we earned on our bank balances was down about $200,000. The amortization for contributed capital also decreased. On the expenditure side, there are two significant pieces here. One is the dividend grant in lieu of taxes. During the year, we signed an agreement with HRM to pay a new dividend on our wastewater and stormwater assets. So that increased our dividend by about almost $900,000. The other key item is we sold a piece of property, and a gain related to that is reflected in the other account here. Under the regulatory deferred account and other comprehensive losses, the main issue here is we changed the discount rate on our pension plan from 3.8% to 3.4%, which drove a significant decrease in our other comprehensive earnings. So as a result of the change, our actuaries required us to make an adjustment, and it resulted in a loss of $3.2 million. As I mentioned earlier, we do the two sets of financial statements. So the results under IFRS was a loss of $900,000. Under UARB, our loss is $9.9 million. The significant items there relate to primarily debt, and under UARB, we expense the principal portion of our debt, which is a reduction of about $20 million. The other issue for IFRS, we record our pension expense differently than we do under the UARB, and that's an adjustment of about $7 million. Under the UARB handbook, I've shown the differences between our budgeted loss for the year and our actual loss. So we budgeted a loss of $15.9 million. We ended the year with a loss of just under $10 million. So revenue is the same under both set of accounting rules. So I won't go through those issues, but the key items as they relate to budget to expenditures under the UARB rules, we had a reduction of about $4.4 million as compared to budget. I've highlighted the key issues: reductions in training, savings around capital. We deferred a couple of the positions that were in the budget. Some of the maintenance costs were able to be deferred, and we had lower consulting costs of about $1.5 million. On the financial and other revenues and expenditures, we have interest revenue being, as much as it went down from last year, it was higher than we had budgeted. We anticipated our cash balances would be lower as a result of our capital expenditures. But in the end of the day, we ended up with an increase in our interest revenue. The other key item, I mentioned the delay related to our debt issue. You can see the impact here. Interest is down 1.7 related to budget, and the principal repayment was down by 1.5. So here is the comparison by service. So here's the same $15.9 million budgeted loss, but you can see it here is by service. The biggest difference between the two is on the water side. So on the water side, we're able to we reduced our costs related to training, chemical costs, and also you can see now how the principal and interest delay related to the debt is reflected here. So you can see there's about $2.2 million less principal and interest payments on the water side. We also, part of UARB, we report under our regulated activities and our unregulated activities. Unregulated is a much smaller proportion of the business. Our net earnings went up by about $500,000, mostly related to operating savings as a result of less affluent at the airport and some of the savings related to our septage tipping. The next key item as we go forward is we wanted to raise the issue of what our accumulated deficits or surpluses were under the UARB reporting. You can see we ended the year, the surplus or accumulated surplus as of the end of March 31st, of about $33.6 million. Most of the surplus is in the water side. But you can see with the budgeted loss for 21-22, we still end the year with a projected surplus, accumulated surplus of about 22 million. But you see with the loss that's been budgeted on the stormwater, we move into a accumulated deficit. Which leads into the next slide around the challenges for 21-22 and beyond. So some of the key things we are doing financially, we will be looking at our cost of service manual and the way that translates into rate design changes. We are going to be focusing on how we can use the far more extensive information we have around consumption to help us improve our revenue projections. We'll also be looking at how we manage our 21-22 operating costs. We continue to generate, or we anticipate we'll continue to generate savings as a result of COVID-19, but we will be continue to identify those savings and adjust as possible. Another key issue for us is how we manage our accounts receivable. So as you'd expect with COVID-19, we have, and some of the processes we put in place in response are the age of our receivables has increased. So our goal is to actively manage those receivables in the anticipation of reducing the amount we would have to write off. As we go into 22-23 and going forward, we have, as you're aware, the water rates have not increased since I think it was April 2017. Obviously, the situation of the utility has changed. So our goal through 22-23 and beyond is really looking at how we develop rate increases and how we're able to smooth those rate increases as we go forward. And then the last issue relates to stormwater and some of the conversations that have been going on around stormwater service expansion and how those decisions will impact us as we go forward. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thanks very much, Louis. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Before we move to questions, actually a point of order. I just want to make sure this requires a motion. So can I have the motion put forward, please, before we go to question?
I can do that.
Thanks, Ted. Can you read the motion for me?
Sure. I move that the Halifax Water Board approve the financial statements of the Halifax Regional Water Commission for the year ended March 31st, 2021.
Can I have a second?
I can second that. Councillor Daigle-Gammon, Commissioner Gammon.
Both. Thanks very much. So Ted, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to say thank you, Louis, for the presentation. I was on the audit committee, and the comments from Grant Thornton was that the audit went very smooth, which is typical. So thanks to you and your team. I wanted to bring up the Appendix E correction because that was the notable thing from the audit committee. And it's really for the benefit of the members who weren't at that meeting. If we could take a look at that, if you could just explain the change that was made and what the nature of the reserves are so that there's no mistake for them.
If you can just bear with me, the package is quite large. So Schedule E is on the last page of the financial statements, which is page 30. The change that was made was in the special purpose reserves. So for those of you that are able to find that schedule, in the first version, we had disclosed the UARB had approved a reduction of those reserves to fund the wastewater deficit that we incurred in 2021. So they approved a reduction of about just over $5 million. We had not disclosed that. The committee asked if we can change the disclosure to actually reflect that expenditure on our financial statements. So we went through, we updated the opening balance and increased it to the $7 million number you see there. We reflected the $5 million withdrawal from the reserve, which gives us a net reserve at the end of the year of about $1.9 million.
Okay. Now, and so the nature of those reserves is they can be used in the future as well for under rate hearing, correct?
Yeah, subject to the approval of the UARB, we can use those reserves.
Yeah, I'd probably say that when we go to the next rate hearing, we should just make a point of taking a look at that and whether or not we can use it, because that has been there since 2007. So make a point for the executive, please, to keep that in mind. It's also worth noting that there was an error that had been kind of carried forward for a little while. It was sitting at 3.5 million on the Appendix E for the reserve amount. But I believe it was correct on the balance sheet, but transcribed, there was an error in Appendix E. Is that fair to say?
I think the issue is the nature of how those reserves were transferred from HRM. Some came across as, we'd say, true reserves, and some part of what came through, what they allowed us to carry forward, I believe it was the dividend for a couple of years that Halifax Water would normally pay. So technically, there would be a little bit of debate as to whether or not that would be a true reserve or not. So I think that led to some of the confusion. So what we did in these statements is we amalgamated them, increased the reserve numbers, the opening balance. But we've
If
considered.
I could jump in and add to that, you're 100% correct, Louis. It wouldn't have been an error. It was really a change in presentation that we've done this year, just to make there be more transparency around the total remaining balance in response to the question from the Audit and Finance Committee. The reserve balances that have been traditionally reflected in this schedule reflected the approved true reserve balances that were approved in the transfer agreement between Halifax Water and the municipality, and the URB approved us establishing those reserves. The other balance that was running through the balance sheet related to a temporary 2 or 3 fiscal year period where the municipality permitted the grant in lieu of taxes, what we call the water dividend, that we give to the municipality. They permitted it to be used to fund wastewater and stormwater capital projects until we were able to establish rates for wastewater and stormwater service. So rather than handing the money to the municipality, them handing it back to us, and it wasn't captured in a reserve balance, it wasn't a true reserve, it was just really a transaction that was within the balance sheet and would have been sitting reflected in equity more or less.
Yeah, I do think the disclosure that's there now is more transparent and was a very good suggestion from the audit committee.
Okay, so one part was a reserve according to financial reporting rules. The other one was not technically a reserve. But now we're true, because it's hard for me to completely understand how it would be non-included before, but included now.
So reserves under the URB Accounting and Reporting Handbook, the establishment of reserves needs to be specifically approved by the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. The reserve balances that have been reflected and that came over in the transfer were approved by the URB The transfer agreement, which was also approved by the URB, did reflect the wastewater and stormwater related funding coming through the dividend, and the URB was aware of and had no issue with the municipality allowing Halifax Water to keep the dividend to fund stormwater and wastewater capital projects. But it wasn't required to be accounted for as a reserve because HRM did not have it sitting on their financial statements as a reserve, and we did not have to request approval from the URB to establish reserves on our financial statements. But if you ever want to walk through the URB accounting and reporting handbook requirements, maybe Lou and I could set up a separate meeting with you on that.
That sounds really interesting. Yes, okay. I guess when you really dig into it, you get up with some pretty fancy rules about what is and isn't a reserve. But so this, for all intents and purposes, like this is money that has some strings attached to it. So for the use of the users of these financial statements, they say we're going to treat this as a reserve, and so this more accurately represents it. So we're all pretty happy with that. Say thank you for the explanation. Appreciate it.
Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Colleen?
Louis, any concern on the delay to the debenture issue, and will we be planning for sort of a delay to those in the future, or kind of a one-time thing?
It was a one-time thing. It didn't have a impact on us financially. We had enough cash in the bank to manage through what we were dealing with. It actually worked out quite well for us, as you can see the savings that we realized because of the delay. So all in all, it wasn't we weren't in dire need of the cash. If we were, it would have been more of an issue. In this situation, it worked out fine.
Thank you.
Councilor Deagle-Gammon.
Thank you so much. I lost the chat again to be able to put it in. So the information that we have in Diligent was, the beautiful financial statements and everything. But when I watched the presentation, Louis, you had sort of condensed and put the most important parts in. So will that presentation be shared with us?
Certainly can.
That would be awesome. I thought it was well done. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions in the chat, no other hands raised, I'm going to call for the question. Motion has been put forward and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary
Aye.
minded? Abstentions? Motion carried. So we'll move on to item 4.2, which is the Halifax Regional Water Commission Employees Pension Plan Audited Financial Statements for the year. Louis, are you speaking to this as well?
Alan Campbell will be doing that. But if you can indulge me, I did want to say thank you to Alicia and Alan and their teams in the preparation of both sets of financial statements. So thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Alan.
Okay, good morning, folks. My name is Alan Campbell. I'm Manager of Finance here at Halifax Water, and I'll be presenting the financial results for the Halifax Water Employees Pension Plan for the year ended December 31st, 2020. Jake? Just as a background, so it's been 2 years since our last valuation. The last valuation was in January 1st, 2019. At that point in time, we reached sort of a milestone. It was the first surplus we had seen in 19 years. So the last surplus we had was in the year 2000. One of the more significant things that came out of that evaluation was our need to no longer, as far as Halifax Water as this plan sponsor was concerned, we had no need to fund the deficit anymore. So that was in the vicinity of $800,000 a year. So that ran for a 3-year period from 2016 to 2018. The prior valuation to that, the 3-year period, we were looking at special payments in the range of $3 million a year. So that was a significant milestone that we achieved in 2019. So I guess the big question for 2020 was, can we maintain or sustain that surplus that we've achieved over the last 2 years in 2018 and 2019? And I guess to cut to the chase, yes, we have been able to sustain that and even improve on that a little bit more. The financial position as at December 31st, 2020, we ended up with a surplus of $13.2 million. That was an increase of $4.5 million over the prior year. A lot of that, again, was as a result of the net assets available for benefits. They increased by $13.4 million. And obviously, to achieve a higher surplus year over year, the net assets grew at a higher rate than the actual pension obligations themselves. Just a quick snapshot of what conceivably or ideally our pension plan does look like. And for those of you that attended the last board workshop and that, you probably noticed this schematic basically. So the net assets available for benefits, if you look at the pension plan as being a bucket, we have inflows into the bucket. So we have investment earnings. We also have contributions from both the plan sponsor, being Halifax Water, and also the members of the plan. So those would be the employees. With respect to outflows out of the plan, we have benefit payments coming out of the plan. Those are typically in the form of either termination payments or pension payments to pensioners in pay. And maybe to a smaller magnitude as far as expenses are concerned, we're looking at plan fees and expenses. Net assets available for benefits. So for the year 2020, if you, again, think of it as an inflow, outflow, from an inflow and outflow perspective, we had inflows as far as revenues were concerned of $12.2 million. Contributions into the plan, $6.5 million for total inflow into the plan of $18.7 million. Outflows in the terms of expenses were $5.4 million. And again, for an increase in net assets available for benefits of $13.4 million. That was down a little bit from the prior year, about $1.7 million. And a lot of that was attributed to the decrease in revenue of $1.9 million. Just looking at the revenue. So the revenue, as I said, $12.2 million in revenue. This was made up of two components, basically the increase in the fair market value year over year of $8.6 million and investment income of $3.6 million. Comparative to 2019, where we saw a revenue of $14.1 million, again, it was down approximately $1.9 million overall. And that was, again, attributed mostly to the reduction in the fair market value of the assets, where we saw a reduction basically of $2 million. Of note, our assets are investment with the HRM Master Trust. The plan currently holds approximately 6.4% of that Master Trust. Net fund rate for 2020 was 7.4 compared to 10.1 last year. And again, of note too, as far as the fair market value of the assets, they can change. The changes can be rather volatile on that stuff. I think 2020 was a prime example where we saw February, March of last year, the capital markets basically took a nosedive, and we were able to recover quite favorably throughout the year. The other inflow into the plan, again, contributions, $6.5 million compared to $6.4 million last year. Again, not a huge swing there. The actuary valuation, while I mentioned about the special payments that weren't required, so that sort of diminished some of the funds that were going into the plan. And at the valuation itself also set the current service costs for the next 3 years. So that would be 18, 19, and 20. 20.68%, and that's shared equally between the employer and the employee, and that's at 10.34%. Net new hires for the year were 3 employees, and actives at the end of the year were 359 employees compared to 456 the prior year. Turning to expenses. Expenses were $5.4 million in total, and it was relatively flat compared to the prior year. Pensioners and pay, they were $4.6 million compared to $4.2 million last year, so a swing of increase of approximately $300,000 there. And termination payments of $0.7 million or $700,000. They were down compared to the prior year of approximately $300,000. Pensioners indexing is based on CPI each year. CPI last year came in at 1.5%. So anybody that was earning benefits prior to 2016 were indexed at the 1.5 rate. Anybody that was indexed, or anybody that had been pension benefits earned subsequent to 2015 were capped at 1%. Retirees during the year, there were 3 retirees compared to 15 the prior year. Pensioners pay at year end 155 compared with 152 in the prior year, and terminations of 17 compared to 14 in 2019. Pension obligations. So pension obligations basically are the measurement of pension promises that have been made to both active and pensioners in pay. And those at the end of the year, the pension obligations totaled $141.8 million. That was an increase basically of $8.9 million over the prior year. And that the increase was attributed basically to the accrued benefits and interest increase of $14.2 million, excuse me, over that 1 year period, and that was offset by retirement and termination benefits that were paid. The extrapolation was done as of January 1st, 2021, and it used the same assumptions and methodologies of the going concern valuation carried out in 2019. In summary, again, a clean audit opinion was received from Grant Thornton. The plan continues to improve, so as we see the years go on, the surplus has increased over the last 3 years, so that's a positive thing. Returns for HRM Master Trust remain favorable, all things considered, so nothing's guaranteed in life. I think 2020 was an experience for us all when the markets sort of took a nosedive, but we came back in fairly good shape. And we're all anticipating the next valuation, which will occur in January 1st, 2022. And that is it. So I can take any questions if there's questions on the floor.
Thanks very much, Alan. Before we move to questions, ladies and gentlemen, can I have a motion, please?
I'll do so.
Ted, can you read it for me, please, Ted?
Yes, I move that the Halifax Water Board approve the audited financial statements of the Halifax Regional Water Commission Employees Pension Plan, for the year ended December 31st, 2020.
Second? Councillor Deagle-Gammon? I saw the hand. Any questions for Alan, ladies and gentlemen?
Can I just make a comment?
Absolutely.
Alan, I just want to give you a shout out. This is not my area of expertise whatsoever, but the way that you've presented it really helped me understand. It's one thing to look at the documentation, and read through the text, but the way that you presented it, I'm just very grateful for that. And certainly, it's a steep learning curve when it comes to learning more about pension plans and how, Halifax Water operates and employees and the whole host of things. So I just wanted to give you a shout out, Alan, and say thank you for the good work you and your team are doing.
Oh, thank you.
Ted, you have a comment?
If nobody has any questions, I just want to give credit to Alan and his team as well. It's nice to have another clean clean sheet on the audit, and things went well with Grant Thornton, and we asked them questions at the audit committee, so we're pretty satisfied with this. And we're lucky that we have a surplus in the pension plan. Thank you.
No other questions, ladies and gentlemen. I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thanks very much, Alan.
Mr. Chair, I will just because Commissioner Kent is not on the screen, if we could just confirm if there were any contrary votes or abstentions.
My apologies. Were there any contrary votes or abstentions? Hearing none. We're going to assume unanimity on that one. All right, let's move to item 5.1, capital expenditures for the fiscal year March 31st, 2021. And I'm assuming Reed's speaking to this.
That is correct.
Okay, so last year, our capital budget was $96.5 million. The amount of money we spent on that was, we spent 30.78% of our capital budget, which was about $28.8 million. Now that is far below where we want it to be, but I will tell you that in total, last year we spent over $60 million, and some of that was projects that had either been funded or started in previous years and were budgeted in previous capital budgets. So I think it's fair to address why we did not spend the level of capital budget that we did. I've managed to go through a number of I'll call large projects that require URB approval over $1 million. And I came up with a number of reasons. Now, these are reasons that we deal with on an ongoing basis every year. And I think it's important to talk about them because there was sort of a confluence of them on major projects in the past year. And some of those factors aren't going to go away quickly, and we need to have a plan to deal with them. So one of the reasons is delays in integrated projects with HRM. We integrate a large number of projects with HRM every year. Many of them are small, but last year we had about $5 million budgeted largely for the Cogswell project, and that is probably going to be starting in the next fiscal year. Land acquisition is an issue. From time to time, we need to acquire land from people to carry out a project. Last year, there was one project of about $3 million that is still being held up by land acquisition because oftentimes when we require land, the landowner's not willing and not necessarily the land is valuable to them and they're not necessarily motivated to work with us. So it can take some time to get a deal on that. Last year as well, we had about a number of projects, 4 very significant ones totaling about $16.4 million that were tied up due to extended periods of approval with both Nova Scotia Environment and the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board for funding approvals. Nova Scotia, one as an example was we're building about a $10 million reservoir near Larry Utek Boulevard off Highway 102. That had an extended Nova Scotia Environment funding approval. At a certain level, that should be a fairly straightforward approval, but it's not one that Nova Scotia Environment sees frequently. And so by the time we received that approval, it was very late in the construction year, and the contractor did not make much progress in last year's fiscal year. We've also identified about $8.2 million that I have called project rescoping. This happens from time to time, But this year, it largely relates to our water supply enhancement program, which is going to take place over 10 years and is going to total about $230 million. We had a fairly long list of projects intended to be started last year. And the first one and most urgent one for us is our Clarifier projects at both the Pockwalk and Lake Major plants. And as we were doing the planning in those projects, that just became more and more complex. And we took much more time to define those projects and ultimately ended up, pushing that entire program back for a year. That project's now underway. We've begun the design process on the Clarifier projects, and the project plan that we've presented before is now the plan that we're executing. And then finally, we had just over $1 million that will relate to COVID. About half of that was fleet deliveries, because getting vehicles is one of the things that's been COVID impacted. Deliveries on pickup trucks are like 18 to 24 months now from when the time we ordered them. And then a small amount, the other half, related to projects in wastewater treatment plants. Often these equipment projects require a manufacturer's representative to come and commission the project and verify the correct installation and train our staff. And if those people were located in Ontario or the United States, as is often the case, those projects were impacted that way. So that adds up to a total of about $38 million that we had full intention and sort of capacity to spend last year, which would have made for a much better picture. So, I think if you were to ask me, aren't some of those things, especially with approvals and funding, just planning issues? If you ask me that question, that would be a fair question, and you'd probably be correct. So I think we're doing a couple things to address that. And it's interesting to bear in mind that it's not that long ago, about 10 years ago, that our capital budget was about $30 million. Our capital budget last year was $96 million. It's $125 million this year. And with the IRP, we over the next 30 years, we're going to spend $135 million per year. We've pretty consistently delivered over the last 10 years about $60 million in capital per year. So I'm still in my short time in this role digging into this, but that's a pretty strong signal that our systems and capacity is designed or is equipped to deliver about $60 million, maybe $60 to $70 million per year. So with that in mind, there's really two things underway. My predecessor, Jamie, earlier this year initiated a project that we're calling the Capital Project Planning and Management Information System. And that is looking at the entire project cycle, how we plan projects, how we budget capital projects, and how we execute capital projects in terms of our internal systems and potentially tools that we'll need for reporting and tracking and assigning those things. But certainly part of that is identifying best practices that we need to be able to deliver those projects and deliver them on time. And then the other thing is we are begun to take a look at, given that essentially we need to spend twice as much capital money as it looks like we're equipped to do, what's the impact on that on staff resources, and how do we design a department that can deliver those projects every year? So that's what I had, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, where this is an information report, I don't think we need to put a motion on the floor. So is there any questions for Reid, ladies and gentlemen? You wowed him, Reid. Oh, Ted.
Thank you, Reid. I know from my past experience as a manager in a core capital program with a pipeline, it is really hard to close out projects and get everything in the ground, okay? I was curious, there's a decent gap here between what we're capable of doing and what we need to do going forward. And I was just curious, what do you think are the most likely ways to close that gap? And how soon?
I think the project that we have to look at our systems and our delivery and consistent methods and that type of thing, that is probably going to be completed in this calendar year. And then it will be some period of time to implement and deliver those things. So I think that is kind of key. I think, when we were delivering $30 million of capital, and I guess the other thing to say, I cited URB and NSE approvals, and as our capital plan grows, the project's scale is becoming larger, and some of them, like storm sewer separation projects, are much more community disruptive projects. And so I think it's fair to anticipate more scrutiny on an ongoing basis from Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board and Nova Scotia Environment. So what we need to do then is, in a much more intelligent way, in a way that's much more honest with ourselves, build those things into our planning process. And land acquisition also is like that. So that is part of what we hope to look at in the current year. Also, I think, as I mentioned, we're looking at the staffing. Do we have the right level of staff to deliver that? It's not a straightforward answer, because it's not a one-to-one relationship between staff and dollar spend, because when we have contractors working, they can spend money fairly quickly, but it does take staff to deliver the capital projects, and those are the things we're going to be looking at. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are the two things I'd point to.
That's what I was thinking. Staff, or sometimes you can go with contractors and consultants.
Yeah,
as well.
and that is something we're looking at as well. We've got a program just underway, which is the Water Supply Enhancement Program. Very soon, we're going to have a similar program underway on wastewater plants, and that is an approach that a lot of utilities take at the program level. Make greater use of consultants on that. But at the same time, we also get questions from Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board on why we're using consultants and not using internal staff. So we have to find the right blend on that, and make sure we leverage our own staff for the right reasons. And I personally favor a model where our staff do the core business and we go outside for consultants where we need special expertise, like treatment processes and things like that.
Okay. Well, I'll say I think we're in good hands. So I'll say thanks, and I look forward to future updates on this.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy, you had a comment?
Yes, the only other thing I wanted to mention, and Reid did a great job explaining our current situation and what he's working on and our approach. Reid's been doing a fabulous job in this new role. He's only been in the job for 3 months, and here we are, coming up with our strategies to help improve and increase our level of capital spend. The only thing that Reid didn't mention that I think is probably worthy of mention is that, aside from figuring out what our future staff complement should look like to deliver the level of capital we need to deliver, we also have the issue of maintaining our current staffing complement in a time when we've had some key retirements. We did a new corporate reorganization effective April 1, which created some people moving around and some vacancies that impacted the engineering and technology services department. So we have to get up to the full staffing complement that we currently have also. That's another issue for us, and attracting and retaining engineers and engineering technologists and all of the other highly specialized staff that are required to deliver these capital projects. So just to kind of wrap things up, we've got a number of initiatives on the way looking at how we deliver in capital. It is something that I think we'll be ready to come back to the board with when we do our business planning for next year.
Awesome. Councillor Deagle-Gammon, you had a comment.
Thank you. It was exactly my question, Reid. Between you and Kathy, answered it. It really was about the HR capacity, and will there be a revised HR plan that will say this many positions are needed in this category, and then how does that balance with the capital need and the HR need? So that was exactly my question, and I appreciate the answer. And the only other thing I was curious about was around one of the reasons of the land acquisition. How long does that stay in abeyance before there needs to be another plan? Like, how long will you hold that in place before you say, okay, that's not going to work, we need to go someplace else?
You know, it really depends on the project. You know, one's they are much more challenging on the wastewater side because, as you know, water flows downhill and we try to make use of gravity. So for instance, a wastewater pumping station needs to be at the bottom of a hill or close to the bottom of a hill. And the farther you move away, the more expensive it gets. You know, so we do have powers of expropriation, but we like to use those as little as possible, and I'm sure our board would like us to use them as little as possible. So we always try to work out things. So, you know, in some cases, we have alternatives that we have to work through as part of that process with the landowner we're dealing with. In some times, there's only one place for the project to go, and we just have to work out or pull a string to allow us to purchase the land. The one I mentioned has been going on for about 5 years. We're getting to the end of that. In this one, it's a particularly large industrial landowner that we have a number of files with on other projects as well. So we're being very careful and patient in how we work through that.
Thank you.
Excellent. I don't see any other questions. No? Thanks a lot, Reid. I'm so glad to hear that we are being proactive on this issue of trying to close the gap on our capital spend. That's been a burning issue at the board for as long as I've been on the board. It appears we're making some really good traction in fixing that. So thank you very much for your work.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we will move on now to item 6, the corporate balanced scorecard. And I actually have a question, Kathy, before you get started, is that the agenda does not note this as a motion, but there is a recommendation in the documentation. So
my apologies. That is a hangover error from last year. Last year, the corporate balance scorecard item did require motion because in addition to presenting the year-end results, we were asking you to amend some of the targets for 21-22 that had been previously approved by the Halifax Water Board as a result of COVID-19. This year, the targets for 21-22 were set at the March board meeting. We don't need to do any amendments to those targets, so we're just coming back and presenting the results. And we did not get that motion taken out.
Awesome. Then I'll turn the floor over to you.
Great, and I'll try to go through this fairly quickly because the information is all in your package. Jake, if you could pull up the presentation and maybe put it to the second slide. So Halifax Water has had a corporate balance scorecard for over 20 years, and it really grew out of a desire to have a continuous improvement program that started in 1999. And in 2001, the Halifax Water Board approved the first corporate balance scorecard for the organization, as well as an organizational award program tied to the corporate balance scorecard. When the original corporate balance scorecard was developed, it was developed with a lot of engagement and workshops with staff through all levels of the organization. And the corporate balance scorecard has been modified a couple of times through the years, most significantly in 2007, 2008, when wastewater and stormwater were added to Halifax Water's mandate, and the corporate balance scorecard had to be expanded. The benefits of a corporate balance scorecard are that it provides a performance measurement system that is easily cascaded throughout the organization. You have corporate level goals, You have individual employees who have goals that align with the scorecard. And the scorecard has worked its way into the administrative order approved by HRM and the framework that the municipality uses to hold Halifax Water accountable. Next slide. So looking at the scorecard, it all links back to the mission and vision of Halifax Water. I'm not going to take the time to read this. The board members have been around with us long enough now that I know you're familiar with our mission and vision. Next slide. So there are 8 critical success factors in the corporate balance scorecard, and they're shown here on this slide. And within each category, there are different organizational indicators that are basically the performance measures that roll up so that the board or the municipality or the URB or members of the public can look and see at how well we are achieving our critical success factors. Next slide. And it's important to note that what shows up on the corporate balance scorecard are really organizational indicators, not individual measures. So all of the indicators that are shown on the corporate balance scorecard, in order for us to be able to achieve them, it means that people in different departments and at different levels need to be working collaboratively, need to be cooperating, our processes need to work, our policies, there need to be good handoffs. And we do have individual measures, but those would be reflected at an individual employee level in their performance goals for the year. And they do tie back and support our organizational indicators. Next slide. So the Organizational Performance Award Program is based on a subset of 12 of the 30 strategic organizational indicators. Attached to your board report, you see the year-end results for the full 30 organizational indicators. That's our scorecard, if you will. And what I'm going to talk to now is just some of the highlights from what we've achieved this year, and then we'll talk about the Organizational Award Program. The Organizational Award Program is based on the indicators that are most objective. So in some cases, they're linked to surveys that are conducted by third parties, for example, or they're linked to measures that are easily verifiable or are verified by third parties like our audited financial results. And the program does pay for itself. If we do not achieve the financial indicator, that's one of the gateways, then there is no organizational award paid out. The dollar value of the organizational award is the same as it has been for the past 20 years. That has not changed. It is somewhat a nominal amount that's meant to incent employees to perform as a team and work together collectively to achieve these organizational indicators. And there have been some years where an organizational award was not paid out when the gateway indicators were not achieved. There are currently 2 gateway indicators, one which is financial in nature and one which is linked to safety. So Jake, if you could move us to the next slide, we'll talk about the first area of critical success, which is high drinking water quality. So high quality drinking water, we have 3 organizational indicators. I'm going to highlight the first one. We did not achieve the adherence with 5 objectives of water quality master plan for this year. Last year we had a 0.82, which would be 82%. This year we came in with a 76. Some of the things that impacted us this year were source lake recovery causing algal blooms. You may remember we had an algal bloom at Lake Major last year. Also, changing consumption patterns caused by COVID-19, particularly in the Burnside Business Park and in the Aerotech and airport area that is serviced by the Bennery Lake water system, would have caused some changes there. Hopefully we'll get back on track with this objective this year. And the customer satisfaction about water quality was slightly lower this year at 84%. And one of the things that may have impacted that, we did have some significant water main breaks this year, such as the ones at Cobequid Road, which would have prompted some concerns with respect to water quality, potentially in terms of turbidity or taste, for example, until things got back to normal. Next slide. Service excellence is an important critical success factor to us. The customer satisfaction with service percentage measured by our external customer service survey is excellent. It's at 96%. That's consistent with last year. We did have a bad year in terms of water service outages. We did not achieve our target there. That's because of the significant water main breaks that we had at the Cobequid Road. Hopefully, we will have a better year in 21-22. Wastewater service outages, we hit the target. We're well beneath the target. And I want to highlight on the call center performance. Our customer care center achieved 71% of calls answered within 20 seconds. That result was at 32% last year. One of the reasons we had indicated last year to the board is that we had a combination of factors, higher call volumes, but we also had a lot of staffing issues and vacancies. And we have staffed up, and the call center has successfully transitioned last year to working fully remotely as a result of COVID-19, and has implemented a new telephony system. So despite having many, many challenges, the customer care center has done a fabulous job and really turned around the customer care center performance. Next slide. Responsible financial management. So Louis given you the financial statements in great and exciting detail, so I'm not going to dwell on our financial position, but I am going to note that we did meet the operating expense to revenue ratio. That is one of the gateway indicators for the corporate balance scorecard organizational award. And I do want to mention that we're going to look this year at how the operating expense to revenue ratio actually gets calculated. We may come back with some recommendations next year around changes there. And there's kind of a twofold reason driving that. The methodology is the same that it's always been since the inception of the program, but we've had some significant changes. For example, we implemented a cost containment program 7 years ago, and new this year in the 21-22 budget, we've actually budgeted for vacancies, calling it a vacancy management factor. So because we're focusing on cost containment and efficiencies in different ways, we need to go back around and revisit whether the calculation of the operating expense to revenue ratio is going to be fair on a go-forward basis, if you will, and if it needs to change or not. Our annual cost per customer connection, we achieved it on the water side. We missed it slightly on the wastewater side. So, but we're not far enough off that causes me significant concern. I believe that's something that we'll be able to address this year. Next slide. Looking at effective asset management, this is an important area for us, and that's reflective of the fact that we've got 4 measures here. The first one relates to water leakage control. That's an area where Halifax Water has traditionally been an industry leader. We did tighten the scorecard metric around that back in 18-19. We need to look at that continually to make sure it's still achievable. We did not achieve it in 2021. Last year, we were at 176 liters per second per day, and this year we're at 193 and above the target range. And the Cobequid Road water main breaks, again, would have been a factor in why we did not achieve that target. I&I reduction was a target where we knocked it out of the park. So we had anticipated that we would only get 450 inspections done this year, and the group led by Kenda McKenzie and her team achieved 1,316 inspections. So great result there. And peak flow reduction, that's another metric that's relatively new. It hasn't been on the scorecard for very long. And that's tied to the wet weather management program and what peak flow reductions we're able to achieve based on some specific capital projects. We had set a target of achieving a reduction of 34 to 38 liters per second, and the group achieved 70 liters per second as the wet weather reduction, which is fabulous. And GIS CityWorks availability, 100% result needs to be recognized. We have a utility that's heavily reliant on that. The capital budget expenditures, Reid has already explained what has occurred there, so we'll just move to the next slide. Workplace safety and security, we have 6 metrics in this area, which is an indication of how important safety is to us. And we had added some new metrics. Only 2 years ago, we added the average score on internal safety audits. And you'll see that this year we've achieved 94.5% is the score on our safety audits. That's a slight improvement over last year's result in terms of the safety audit score, and has achieved the target. So great work to our operations and capital folks who are really complying with our safety SOPs and enabling that good audit result. We had no incidents with written warnings and compliance orders from Nova Scotia Labour and Advanced Education. We're proud of that. Our lost time accidents were low and met the target. The one area on the safety metrics that, as general manager, I'm not overly happy about is the fact that our safe driving target wasn't met. So there were 5.5 traffic accidents per million kilometers driven. And we set our target that we should have no more than 5. And when you dig into why we are having accidents or what the most common cause is, it's often things that are occurring in our own yard with people backing up. So that's going to be an area of focus for the safety program this year. And as general manager, I'll be going out to visit all depots and treatment plants over the summer months, just to share the corporate balance scorecard results. And also one of the areas of focus I'll be talking about is safety and the need for people to be doing circle checks and looking around before they back up. Training, we did not achieve that target, and that was impacted by COVID. So a number of the training programs that we need for our employees just could not be offered due to gathering restrictions caused by COVID-19. Now with the latest increase in terms of gatherings permitted for trainings in person, we are able to get our training program back on track. And I think the prevalence of vaccinations is going to mean that there's continued improvement in the ability of us to get access to training programs throughout the remainder of the year. And safety talks being completed, we achieved that target. Next slide. Regulatory compliance, good results here. With respect to the first one, we had no infractions resulting in summary offense tickets. With respect to the wastewater treatment facilities, we did not achieve the target because only 93% of the wastewater treatment facilities were in compliance with NSC approval permits. We did improve over last year though, because last year's result was 91.2%. And the reason we did not achieve that target this year primarily was related to some ongoing process changes and equipment replacements at the Dartmouth wastewater treatment facility. And there were 3 other smaller wastewater treatment facilities where there were some process issues. That would be Springfield Lake, Mill Cove, and North Dartmouth. But I think the fact that we've demonstrated some improvement this year, and I know there are a number of capital projects and process projects on the go for this year, I'm hopeful that we'll get to meeting that target metric this year. Next one. Environmental stewardship, the number of ICI properties inspected, although we were successful in other types of inspections, this was one type of property inspection we do where we did not achieve our target. And the reason we didn't achieve that target is a lot of the inspections reflected here, ICI properties, would have been businesses that were impacted by COVID-19. And there would have been a lot of businesses that were in fact closed or not operational, so that impacted our ability to do inspections. Energy management, we did a fabulous job with respect to energy management this year with an 8% reduction in our energy consumption as a result of some capital projects, primarily at wastewater treatment facilities. So our target was to achieve a 3% reduction. We actually achieved an 8% reduction. Finally, the last target we achieved here was biosolids residual handling. 98.6% is a great result. Next slide. Getting close to the end. Motivated and satisfied employees, last but not least. What I want to highlight on this slide is really the percentage of jobs filled from internal candidates. At 75%, that's a significant improvement over last year when we were at 65%, and I believe it may be the highest we have ever been. Halifax Water, in its 20 years of having a corporate balance scorecard, has never hit that 80% target. So we have been working hard in terms of rolling out a new employee development guide and trying to make internal candidates more aware of different career paths. So we're building a talent pool of employees who can move through the organization. So I'm really pleased to see that we're having some improvement there. Our employee satisfaction survey result is a B+, and that is a good result. It compares to the B+ we had last year. We are very close to being able to get to the A, I think. And although the letter score, B+, is the same as last year, when you dig into the numerical scores that are within our employee survey, there was an increase in the numerical scores, just not enough to move us up to the A this year. So we're headed in the right direction. Finally, the average number of days of absenteeism was 5.88. That's a good result. It's comparable with the private sector. It's much better than most public sector. And as long as we can keep ourselves beneath the 7 days, I think it's a result the Halifax Water Board should be proud of. So in summary, just moving into the next slide, the organizational awards program, as I mentioned, is based on 12 of the organizational indicators. If you move to the next slide, Jake, you can see that the total theoretical amount of award is $1,000. It's based on, it gets prorated downward based on the point score of what we achieve. Any scores on the corporate balance scorecard less than 7, then there would be no award paid out in that particular year. Moving to the next slide, you'll see the 12 organizational indicators that the award is based on. And you can see in the result, if we accomplish the target that's set by the organizational indicator, then we get a point. The points get added up for a maximum score this year of 8 out of 12, which means that the organizational award is $700 per employee. Next slide. So in summary, the corporate balance scorecard track record here has been positive. We'll continue to be bringing the corporate balance scorecard and the organizational award program that's tied to it to the board on an annual basis to get the board's approval. And we'll continue to report back on our achievement and results. Our next step is that we will be preparing our accountability report, which we'll be asking the board chair to sign off on, and then that goes to regional council, probably last part of July or first couple of weeks of August. And this will be presented, some of it, at our annual general meeting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kathy. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Colleen, you had a comment?
I think Commissioner Deagle Gammon's ahead of me.
Yeah, she definitely is. Sorry about that. Commissioner Deagle Gammon, you first.
No problem at all. What a really nice way to look at how the organization is performing. In the comment section, Kathy, sometimes like your comments are really valuable because you're making a comparison between the previous year. So I'm just wondering, in some of those places, would we be able to see the previous year to be able to make a comparison? And then the other thing is, is 8 out of 12, how does that stack up with the last couple of years? Like, is proportionately, I know it sounds like you're pleased. The maximum would have been 1,000. I'm sure everybody would like to get up to the 12. But how does that compare in the previous years? And again, just if there was another column that said, the year previous it was this, would be great.
Yes, and we can certainly add, when we bring this back to the board again next year, we can put the columns in showing the prior year results. We did try to refer to it in the text of the report, but it would be easier to see if it were included graphically. So I see Heidi's making a note there. That's good. And with respect to how it compares to previous years, the award payout this year is a little less than the last 2 years. I think last year it was in the 900-ish range, and I think the year before that was in the 800-ish range. So this year's result is a little lower than the last 2 years.
Would just as a follow-up, would there be any consideration, a COVID consideration, like a factor of something that would be attributed to COVID if some of these things were beyond the organizational or the employees' abilities?
That's an excellent question, and one that the board chair had challenged me on, wanting to make sure that we were being fair to employees in how we were assessing and evaluating achievement of the corporate balance scorecard results. And although there are a number of organizational indicators that were impacted by COVID-19, when I look at the 12 that were tied to the organizational award, those are ones that I feel were within our control and were not impacted by COVID-19 and anything that was outside of our ability to control.
So those would have been those ones where you have in red gateway.
Perhaps, Jake, if you could go back to the slide, that's it. Yeah. So the biggest factor that impacted, where we lost points here, we weren't so much impacted by COVID-19. It was the water main breaks on the Cobcould Road. And COVID-19 might have had an impact on the water quality master plan objectives too, though. That is probably the one where there was a bit of COVID impact, because water consumption at Aerotech Park, or excuse me, Bennery Lake, and in the Burnside Business Park area made it harder for us to meet our chlorine residuals there, so we would have lost points. But the customer water quality survey results, that was probably impacted by water main breaks, we think. The number of traffic accidents we didn't achieve, that was the backing up issue mostly I talked about, not so much COVID-19. The wastewater treatment facility compliance, that was another one that wasn't impacted by COVID-19. It was really process issues or equipment replacements going on impact the ability to maintain compliance while we're trying to simultaneously operate the plant and make changes.
Thank you.
Colleen?
Similar comment, actually. Good thing Commissioner Deagle Gammon went first. First of all, congratulations, fantastic results and well presented. I was just looking for something similar without making it more complex, but I wondered if we could grab something from what we're starting to develop on our enterprise risk matrix, where you could show a trend. So as you said, you could either show last year's result or even a trend. And my request was to somehow maybe color code it. With so many rows, it's hard to tell when a lower number is a good thing and a higher number is a good thing. Louis will appreciate, I really had to think about the operating versus revenue ratio. So it does not in any way take away from the performance, but with so many there and in some cases up is better or down is better, if you could maybe indicate a green or a red trend on them.
That's an excellent idea. We'll incorporate some colors, green for good, red for bad, yellow for no change.
I see no other questions. Does anybody have any other questions for Kathy? I just want to ask it's a little bit in the weeds, Kathy, but the backup issue, is that related to backing up inside of our facilities, or is that out in the wild?
It's more so in yards, and the other issue that shows up in our traffic accidents, there are a couple of fender benders, basically slow speed rear ending of vehicles. Those would be the two most prevalent issues. Do you want to say anything to this, Kenda?
Find my mute button, sorry. No, that pretty much captures the issues, and we did launch a campaign this year called Goal, Get Out and Look, and we've been we have the stickers here. We've been putting those on the rear view mirrors, and one of the initiatives that we'll be working with the manager of fleet will be to try and figure out some of the different best practices or different approaches that we can for education and moving forward. We have a few ideas that we've been batting around, so we just got to get those implemented.
So does, just because some of them are in the yards, I feel I have to ask this question. Does Halifax Water have a back-in policy?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Ted?
Nothing. That is exactly what I was going to ask. This is not a Halifax Water Corporation problem. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm backing up.
Sorry, Ken, did I cut you off there?
No, I was just going to sometimes with some of the bigger equipment and trailers, getting things hooked up, that type of thing. The primary focus is back your vehicles into a space, but sometimes the bigger equipment can be a bit more complicated.
Sure. No, that makes 100% sense. Okay. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? I see nothing in the chat. Poor Commissioner Kent still seems to be having some major technical issues, so unless she screams, I'm gonna move on.
I'm good. I can hear you. I can't. I don't. Everything else is gone. I've got that little sidebar that's still functional for chat and talking, so I'm here.
You're hanging in. Appreciate your diligence. So thanks a lot, Kathy. That excellent results. I mean, Halifax Water continues to, I believe, set an example for operations, period, whether they're public or private. And credit to you and your team on another excellent year. We have a couple of other things, but I believe we have included these just to highlight that there are some reports there that pertain to filings that will be put forward to the Utility and Review Board. We don't have any intention of doing presentation here, I do not believe. But
Can I just ask a question?
Sure, absolutely.
I'm really sorry, Craig. I'm having issues with the tab coming and going, so I can't really, I wasn't able to enter anything into the chat, but I did just want to ask one quick question,
Sure.
Kathy, with regards to the scorecard. And, you know, while I understand that we didn't do as well as we did previously, you know, with COVID and everything and all of the other issues, I just feel like this really needs to be promoted. You know, I feel like it needs this. So I'm just curious as far as how we promote outside of the actual utility itself to ensure that the broader public is aware of the fact that we're doing good work, especially moving into this new kind of period of bringing in all these brand new customers and, you know, looking into the next year as far as, you know, being a difficult time with customer relations and so on. So I just wanted to find out from you how we'll be promoting this and if there was a plan from a communications perspective. Thank you.
That's an excellent question. Typically, we have not externally promoted this. You know, we publish it to the Halifax Water website and we submit it as part of information to HRM Council with the accountability report. And we do some internal communications, but we do not do anything externally. We do have a new manager of communications and public relations who's actually starting on Monday. So I will take this away and have a talk with him and our outgoing manager of public relations and communications next week to talk about how we can do some publication or promotion so that our customers are more aware that we do have a corporate balance scorecard. We do a lot of performance measurement and we're performing well.
I appreciate that, and I just realized, yes, of course, because I read the comms plan and I saw that you know, that the manager is retiring and there's a new person starting, and that, you know, I just realized how quickly June is passing by us. So starting on Monday, awesome, that's great.
And James Campbell is here on the line. I want to acknowledge this is James Campbell's last month with Halifax Water. He's completing a 21-year career in total between the municipality and Halifax Water. And he's been our manager of communications and public relations, you know, Halifax Water's first and only manager of communications and public relations. So he's set us up well. And our new manager of communications and public relations is named Jeff Myrick, and you will meet him at the September meeting.
Awesome.
Thank you, James.
Thanks very much, James.
My pleasure.
Thank you, James. I'm going to miss you so much because you, from the very beginning, when I first came on council, you were the person who saved my bacon more times than enough. Thank you.
Well, I like bacon too, so I appreciate that compliment.
Excellent. Are there any other questions? Raise a hand. Okay, no, nothing. Okay, excellent.
Can I offer something to James while he's still here? Sorry, I'm still
Absolutely.
struggling on this end.
Absolutely.
James, it's been a pleasure working with you again for a short period of time. Twice we've had 2 short periods of time, but in every case, it's always been such a pleasure, and you've done such a great job. Congratulations and all the best with whatever life holds for you now.
I really appreciate that, Becky. My first plan is just to storm the border of New Brunswick and hang out at the cottage for a while, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Awesome.
All right. There are 3 reports that we are not presenting, but they are highlighted in the agenda. They are with relation to filings to the Utility and Review Board at the end of the month. Please review them. If you have any questions, please forward those questions to Kathy and have them addressed. But we wanted to put them on the agenda in a kind of a highlighted state to bring it to your attention that this is about to be filed, and it doesn't require any action by the board, but it's important that the board be aware that these things are about to go forward. So if there are any questions on that, I'll open the floor. Nothing? Hearing nothing. 12:02, we almost made it. Can I have a motion for adjournment, please?
I'll move that. Becky.
Awesome, Becky. Can I have a second?
No seconds are required.
No seconds are required. I gotta get you together with the other individual that advises me on this, because you guys don't agree on this issue of a motion for adjournment. I gotta tell you.
I
In
agree
any
with
case,
Heidi.
Me
I'm
too.
fine with that. We're out of here, folks. Thank you very much. Always
Thanks,
a pleasure.
guys.
And we'll see you later.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Kathy
Thank you.
and team, you guys are great.